Good afternoon, dear guest. Welcome to the Accenture Smart Service World here at the Hub.Berlin. My name is Wolfgang Decker. I'm a managing director with our Industry X practice, and I take care during my professional life on IoT platforms, analytics, and services. Before the break, we have seen an intense discussion moderated by Frank Riemensberger and a panel of industry experts that dealt with data, with smart data, with artificial intelligence, and thereafter with machine learning. In the next session, we want to take it one step deeper. We want to learn what does it take to embark on a journey to service development. We have in the first round lined up a round of industry experts that will share some nuggets of their professional experience, some learnings, how they got to a position developing smart services. And I would want to start straight away with Alexander Franke. Alexander Franke is the founder and CEO of a Berlin-based startup called BotConnect. BotConnect delivers a nice bridge to what we've seen this morning. You correct me if I'm overstating.
No,
or
perfect.
wrong.
Thank you.
BotConnect enables, or is a platform that enables the collaboration between humans and artificial intelligence. Before this, he's also done something very important. He served as an interim managing director for a very old, very traditional company, founded in 1906, if I'm not mistaken. That company is called Klöckner. Klöckner has some 8.8 thousand employees, 170 distribution centers all across the world. The core business is steel and metal distribution. And Alex helped to build what's called Klöckner Eye, the digital branch for Klöckner. And that was extremely successful, transforming an old traditional company really into the new. Alex, stage is yours.
Thank you so much,
This is
Wolfgang.
your clicker.
Thank you. Perfect. I would like to talk with you a little bit about collaboration of teams and AI, because my team and I, we believe that organizations who will master AI and enable their teams to utilize it will have a significant competitive advantage. And I would like to start with a real use case my team and I are currently solving. So we are working for a big national insurance company here in Germany, and they're getting more than 2 million inbound calls every year into their service center. And they also don't want to replace that with a robot or something. So they would like to have their still humans who talk to their customers and have an engagement, because it's a very important touch point. An insurance company has a long customer lifetime with its customers, and so this touch point is very important. But the challenge right now is that they can't create any added value for the customer in the call. So they're just calling in, say, hey, I need to do my taxes, could you please send me the invoice of my Riester rent? And then the service agent will fulfill this, but there is nothing he could offer. So what we want to crack is, what's the next best offer to create value for the customer? And to do this with a classic CRM approach, it's not doable, because I don't know if you have an insurance with some companies like Allianz and so on. They have multiple products created in different years, and they are changing all over time. So to find the best next offer for a salesperson is already quite a task. So what we have built it is that the AI will define the next best offer, and it will deliver it to the service agent through a classic messenger. So that could be Microsoft for Teams or Slack or anything. So this information is delivered to the service agent, and he can then decide how to place that in a call. I don't know if one of you is with Deutsche Telekom or so. So their approach is sometimes just to call you and offer you their new products because it's a campaign. But this is different. Here, the best offer is calculated on the individual needs. And then the service agent also doesn't have to sell the product in that moment or get the sign up from the client for that offer. He just asking for if he's interested, and if the person is interested, then it will hand it over to the sales team. So that also gives the opportunity to the service agent who is in touch with the customer not to be very pushy to sell a product. So what we're building right now is the platform which connects the AI with the humans, and we're using chat as an interface. I know there is a lot of buzz around chatbots and all these kind of things. For us, it's just the natural interface and very simple to deploy in enterprise architectures to utilize chat with Slack, Microsoft for Teams, or Skype for Business. And our platform currently is open, so we can connect with all data hubs there. Right now, we're working with 5 databases to create the next best offer, and in the future, we will work with over 40 databases. So, what I've learned, so we started the company in April, and I also had to look at a lot of other startups and company and what they're doing with AI. And since it's such a new field, my core advice is not to implement any black box AI. And what I mean with this is that a lot of companies offer you something very capsuled. And they say, yeah, this is our AI, and that's the secret sauce, the magic. But AI is not that magic. So there are frameworks out from Google and so on, and already small teams can build tremendous stuff with it. So I would recommend always when you're starting in AI, with the most companies do right now, be open, understand it, and when you're starting, it's the important thing to find a real business challenge. Very often when I work with large corporates, they said, yeah, we have so much data, we want to build something out of it. From my perspective, that really doesn't make sense. You need to find some core business challenge, because then you can get the budgets and the teams and align it with your goals. The next thing I would advise is always to start with a small MVP. Make it very simple, which reduces the risk to fail. So it can have a small budget, bring a small team together, or get some external support, but it should always be connected to the core business. Because then you can show the organization how it worked, and then it will open you doors to do more and implement it. And you can start very small. You don't have to hire like 100 people who are in machine learning or so. You can start with a very small team, learn about AI, learn about the infrastructures and so on. And then if it's successful, if your first MVP worked out, then you can move on and scale. So we're searching for 10x challenges in every industry. So yeah, would love to talk to you after our session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. And he will be back with us in the panel after the other 2 presenters. Next would be Ben Cate. Ben Cate is currently serving as the CEO for a security company called Trustonic. He's also been with the foundation of that company 5 years back, round
Yes.
about. He has a history in the semiconductor industry. He worked with ARM before, and as part of ARM, he was founding and chairing the Linaro organization. Linaro is an entity backed by industry that had the task, the mandate to bring Linux onto the ARM platform. ARM is something we all know. It's the chipset in 95% of all the mobile devices. And the most prominent distribution that your foundation at the end of the day brought to the market is called Android. Ben, eager to listen into your story.
Wonderful. Well, firstly, thank you, Wolfgang and Accenture, for the opportunity. So let's dive in. We'll talk a little bit about how to build an ecosystem. So what kind of experience do I have in this space? So if we talk about the last 2 ventures that I produced. So most recently, we founded Trustonic, so about 5 years ago, actually. And the whole focus of Trustonic was, how do you put better security technology in this device? And then how do you make that security technology accessible and open to companies that are building experiences, whether that's a banking company, payments company, social media company, to really improve and really simplify and enrich that experience. So today that company has more than 1.2 billion devices, and it has over 500 million different user applications secured. So in the platform world, I would say this is a company that's just starting its journey up the J curve. Now, before that, I co-founded, I should say, a company called Lenaro. So this was a not-for-profit organization. So for those that are familiar with the ARM ecosystem, this is lots of different silicon companies that fiercely compete with each other, but also compete with other industry behemoths like Intel. And so the issue, sort of circa 2010, is Android was starting to gain traction. It looked like Intel, with their many thousands of engineers, was going to start making a serious penetration into mobile. And the ARM ecosystem needed to look at how it could both compete fiercely, but also learn to collaborate better as well. So Lenaro is all about getting fiercely competitive organizations to collaborate on the foundations of Linux so that they can free up hundreds of engineers each to then go off and focus on differentiating those devices. And today, I think they have more than 35 different strategic investors in that business and hundreds of companies that feed from that foundation. So anyway, that was a little bit of some of the fun and games and pains that we've had over the last 5, 6, 7 years. So my assertion really is to encourage innovation. Industries and tech companies out there really seek out the best technology. So it's logical to move from that and say, clearly, ecosystems will start to grow around companies that can deliver the best and simplest access to technology. Now, 15 years or so ago, we've started to see ecosystems in technology really start to come together. Before that date, we had kind of the Wintel monopoly, but very little in way of organic ecosystems. Probably in the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen a much bigger acceleration here. And why is that? Well, we've moved from phones that were made by a device maker. They had maybe one service or just a set of services from that device maker, maybe a couple of carrier services, to now today's model where you have an open ecosystem, and what you're really looking at is a set of very rich services from lots of different providers, the providers you as a consumer, as an end user want. And in the broader Internet of Things, what you're going to see is many more different types of devices, and some of those devices will be single function, and some of them will need to run many different services. So there's a lot of opportunity now for, I would call it the rise of the ecosystem. But, and for those with kids, you may have played this game with your children, right? Animal, vegetable, or mineral. So the first thing, if you're starting up a business, is really understand yourself, right? Are you a device company? And does your device do one thing or lots of things? Are you building a service? For example, maybe you're building something around medical records, and you need that platform to run on both consumer devices and maybe some professional-grade medical devices. Does that mean you need an ecosystem? Or does it mean that you need to plug into somebody else's ecosystem, like Android or the General Electric ecosystem? If you go to another extreme, there's a company that started off as a vertical service, Salesforce, and today it's basically a platform, right? People get in there, there's a core set of valuable services that you get and you pay for from Salesforce.com, but actually then you can really get much better value by plugging in and utilizing other companies' solutions that plug into the Salesforce platform. And that leads you to the far extreme, which is, okay, now you want to start up a platform company, right? And I warn you, these are the hardest, most difficult, and most loveless ventures to start, I can tell you. But they're, clearly great examples are things like Android. But look at who started Android, who really got that successful. It was Google. So to start up a platform company without scale is a hard thing, but it can be done. But before you go into that, a bit of a distinction, right? Lots of people confuse this. Your customers are not the same thing as your ecosystem. Okay? Lots of people talk about broad stroke ecosystems, right? Your customers are the people you need to derive revenue from, that you need to deliver fundamental value to. They are what will make your business firstly break even and then hopefully thrive. Your ecosystem is everybody else that helps you get there further, faster, or to a greater extent. So when we talk about, you've worked out you need some sort of ecosystem, and the next question is how to go about that, okay? And everybody's experiences here are going to be different. I've got a couple of experiences, and no doubt other people have many others too. So firstly, across that ecosystem, various parties' motivations are going to vary greatly. So I would suggest that you firstly start by understanding what is it you need to do to be successful yourself. Understand that very, very clearly, and then take that and look at, okay, who do I therefore need to win in order to succeed? And can you articulate a clear rationale for why companies should partner with you? If you can't, you're going to have a very, very tough time. But let's say you get that far. The other thing to remember is there's no silver bullet, right? When it comes to a proposition, it's about understanding, let's get to a good proposition, right? Employ the 80-20 or the 90-10 rule, and then move from trying to validate that idea internally to iterating that idea with your key ecosystem partners. Because at the end of the day, probably many of them will have contrasting requirements, and you're going to have to find a balance that somehow bridges these continuum of differing requirements. And the more that what you want to do is going to try and disrupt a well-established ecosystem, the status quo of an industry, the more pushback you're going to get, right? So believe me, I look younger than I am, and I feel a lot older than I look, right? So the reality is you will get a lot of pushback. But if you really believe this is the right thing to do, you should persevere, right? It will happen. Unfortunately, it may not always happen in our lifetime. So here's my last sort of 4 things to take away, right? 1, in tech, windows of opportunities don't last. In fact, they're narrow. So if you see an opportunity, you should seize it. And the sooner you seize it, the better, right? And you know, this is kind of a little bit cheesy, but it really is true, okay? I've taken opportunities right when the window's closing, and it's really hard to try and get that into a shape in time. The second part is momentum. So particularly in platform business, the analogy is you're trying to get a big, heavy train moving. And as you start to push it and you start to make it, you might start to make progress, you're trying to build that every month, every quarter. And the problem is that if you fall off that train, it's very easy for somebody else to jump on board and take that momentum. So it's really hard. You can't fall off when you start moving. And you need to look across your organization as you're scaling and the energy levels of the teams around you. So what goes along with this is focus, right? It's so easy, right? You've got bright people, you've got good technology. People will come to you internally and externally with all sorts of ideas, right? Do not deviate from your core plan. Absolutely, as a management team, sit down every 6 months, every year, and think, okay, are we winning? Are we doing the right things? But really, really focus. And my last point, if I would make, and every time I do this, I think I wish I did this better and faster, which is, as you're scaling your company from your own 1 person to 5, to 10, to 20, to 50, to 100, right? The only way you're going to achieve this is by empowering your team and building a great management team. You cannot have anybody in your team that's operating at 60 or 70 or 80%, right? It might sound brutal, right? But you don't have time to mentor those people. Naturally, a lot of people in this room probably will say, oh, hey, I know they're 70%, but I can work with them, You don't have time. So make the changes now, make them quickly, and bring on great people that will help you get to an end success. As Trustonic, we're just about 100+ person today. And what I'd say is now we're starting to have proper development plans for people. We're having interns brought in and so forth. But without a great management team, that would have changed. And the management team I started the business with, which, by the way, was a 3-way European joint venture, a French company, a British company, and a German company. So what could go wrong? Actually, pretty much everybody in the management team has changed. So that's my initial input. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben, for sharing your insights with us. The last but not least speaker is now Professor Dr. Carsten Bartsch. He's the Vice President, Director of Business Programs and Professor for Marketing and Strategy at HDBW, which is the Hochschule der Bayerischen Wirtschaft, which is a university startup as such. Mm-hmm. He is not born in the ivory tower. He had a life before. You worked as a consultant. You ran a business unit for a large medical devices manufacturer, and till today you are working as a consultant in your spare time, so to say. Looking forward for your presentation.
Okay, thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. What I want to do today is I want to talk to you a little bit about universities as smart services. And please, as Wolfgang said in the introductory words, don't worry, you know, this is not supposed to be kind of like a little excursion to the ivory tower right now. What I'll try to do is I will try to sort of develop some similarities between what we're facing in the university world and what you're going through in the business world when looking at the smart service development. And I believe there's quite a lot of similarities. Why? Because if you think about it, we as universities were actually a pretty odd bunch. You know, we're really an odd bunch because we think we do research and then we help universities develop, we help companies develop, we educate young people, we give you the right employees, and yep, they will be helping you to develop, and then all our research and our young people, they work in your companies, and all of a sudden we as universities, we lean back and say, what's happening out there in the real world? That's quite interesting. You know, that's something which could be affecting us as universities as well. And this is exactly kind of what we're talking about, because we're all talking about IoT and Industry 4.0 in Germany. And quite honestly, there's also University 4.0, a university that's user-centered, industry convergent, and really stretching across institutions and creating ecosystems. Now you might be thinking, okay, marketing professor, you know, this is why he does buzzword bingo, University 4.0, all that. Not really, because if you look at the development stages of universities, there's something like the University 1.0, the Scholars University, I don't know, Middle Ages, universities of Prague, all the good stuff we're envisioning. Then there's also something like University 2.0, where applied industry needs come into focus. You think that's something modern right now when we talk about business schools or something like that? No, already in 1898, for example, just a couple of miles away from here in Leipzig, the Leipzig Graduate School of Management or the Leipzig School of Commerce was founded. Why? In order to train tradesmen with their practical needs. Well, at some point of time, University 3.0 developed out of that when, hey, which was a big experience for university scholars, we realized there's a life outside classrooms. Okay, there's a life outside classrooms. We started connecting with companies. We started offering new, for example, distance learning, studying models and all that. And today, well, hey, today, there's no real spatial or organizational barriers or boundaries anymore. So universities really are becoming increasingly part of ecosystems, interacting with a whole lot of different partners, with digital technology really being one of the key enablers. And obviously that leads to a lot of changes in sort of the business model and the self-reflection of universities, because nowadays we can say knowledge that comes from the cloud, and actually the campus of a university becomes the entire world. If you look at a couple of very current numbers, an article from Quartz just 3 weeks old, over the past 6 years, 800 universities in the world have made more than 8,000 MOOCs available. MOOCs, massive open online courses. In other words, university-level course offerings being available free of charge, online, 24/7 at any place in the world. Just in the past 3 months, more than 200 universities have added more than 600 new courses to that. So you see the dynamic and really the hockey stick going up about that. If you think about that, one of the largest universities in the world, the University of Phoenix, has more than 400,000 students. With only a small share of those really physically studying on a campus, most of them studying through distance learning, digital models. Just as a comparison, in Germany, Distance University of Hagen, which is the largest university in Germany, has around 80,000 students, just to put the number into perspective. So, as you see, universities face the same challenges as the business world. We have to fundamentally question our business models, and that really gets underlined if you look at a couple of those MOOC, massive open online courses numbers from universities. For example, Harvard University, you see the potential to really threaten the existing business models. I mean, there's a couple of numbers in there which are rather cute. 120 faculty members are involved in developing such kind of MOOCs. Interestingly enough, as leads with other schools. Okay, keep that in mind when we discuss ecosystems. The two numbers I want to draw your attention to is more than 4 million course registrations. In other words, more than 4 million students, in quotation marks, taken part in those MOOCs. More than 110,000 certificates also earned through such digital courses. So the course service of universities really changes fundamentally, which also makes us transforming from a mere learning place to a place where individuals can really grow, or, hey, if we don't manage that, we might be disappearing. Look at our service. Knowledge comes from the cloud, so we don't have to stand in front of students anymore trying to teach them knowledge and have students, have the ongoing battle of their eyelids fighting gravity or something like that when they're trying to stay awake. The processes, our universities have to become places where knowledge meets in order to discuss how knowledge can be applied and in order to create new knowledge. So we have to adapt our existing business model in order to avoid becoming really obsolescent with our business model. In terms of our professors, professor or any other disseminator of knowledge, they're no longer teacher of knowledge. They really become personal growth coaches to help their students, again in quotation marks, in their personal developments, which requires a whole lot of different skill set than a traditional university professor used to have. And last but not least, the boundaries between universities, companies, and visionaries are disappearing, with IT really being the enabler to provide access to knowledge, experiences, and problem-solving skills pretty much real time. And there's also quite interesting examples for such kind of ecosystems where university, just like the business world, have to learn to think outside the box. If you look at Technical University of Munich, for example, and their entrepreneurship approaches, you see, hey, they're partnering up with potential customers, with companies that might be buying the products or services from their startups. Obviously, they're partnering up with capital, with banks, VCs, and all of that. But they're also partnering up with research institutes, and they're also partnering up with other universities. That's something new for universities because, if you translate that to your business environment, that is partnering up with your competition. Those are people who are in the market for the same smart students, for the same great professors, for the same good researchers, for the same money, and all of a sudden you're supposed to work together with them. Why? To create a well-working ecosystem and make sure that, hey, if you can't beat them, join them, let's get together and let's create more interesting new businesses in that example. That's only one example right now, looking at new businesses. Obviously, the same approach, the same philosophy is true to a lot of university activities in terms of teaching and also in terms of research. In doing that, universities really face the classical platform branding troubles like any company, like you know it from your business world as well. I mean, given the shortened life cycles of knowledge, sometimes, knowledge disappears after 2 or 3 years. So students, might be graduating with their degrees and their knowledge is already outdated. So the question is, what does that do to our classical approach of 4-degree programs, and will it not be important to create more flexible options of getting knowledge for students? Now I did what I was not supposed to do, but I fixed it. Hey, there we go. Therefore, universities have to adopt their business model, create such options like the MOOCs or any other approaches how students, again in quotation marks, can get access to knowledge. However, that might mean that the branding really moves away from a university as the place where a student decides to study, to the professor, the guy I get the knowledge and the skills from. So the question is, what does that do to the universities? Maybe universities of the future have to concentrate on providing a great ecosystem where great professors, where great thinkers, where great visionaries are willing to work in order to meet there, collaborate, and therefore provide exciting opportunities for students as well. I mean, very well, the university of the future might be looking like that. I mean, many of you might remember, you know, those course catalogs in the beginning of the semester, and then you had to search for your classes and all that. Then you found out, okay, the time has moved and all of the above, you know. Nowadays, hey, Alexa, please find me a course on product management or project management. Obviously, Alexa knows my preferences, short courses instead of degree programs in English and very applied, and knows all my background and skills and previous education. So that might very well be the future. This is a future which tells us as universities that just like you as the business world, digitalization and smartness are challenges for us, which we have to deal with. We have to adapt our business models to create new ways of studying and researching without cannibalizing our existing business models. And hey, if we don't manage to do that, very likely we'll end like the dinosaurs. And having said that, as a dinosaur, that's my 5 cents of wisdom. I'll turn the stage back to Wolfgang. Maybe the sign you talk too long. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carsten. One can truly tell that you are a marketing professor. Thanks for that inspiring presentation. With this, I would want to ask my 3 speakers to the panel, please. We need some technical adjustments with Carsten. You broke the mic, okay.
Does that what? Okay.
Okay. Dankeschön.
So, ich habe da noch eins. Well, thank you very much for these inspiring presentations. I would want to start with a question for Alex. And you explained the platform you're building, the ecosystem you're building.
Yes.
And I would want to tie this a little bit back to your Klöckner role. What were the challenges to transform Klöckner into the new, and how did you overcome this? What were the barriers? Is it a cultural resistance, or how would you overcome these challenges?
Yeah, I think I could break it down to 2 things that we as a team did quite well, and things we would do differently now after that journey. And I think what was great success was to go down to the front line of the business, to work together with the salespeople in the field who are selling steel, so we're not into any digital transformation and these kind of things. So to work with them, how we could create value for their customers through digital transformation. I think that was the best thing, because we were not in the ivory tower, we were out in the field and we learned, and that was very successful. The other thing, what I would do differently next time if I do a digital transformation, is that I would give people more time. So when you're building companies and you have done this, then you're always, you know what an MVP is, you know how to build prototypes, all these kind of things. But people in traditional companies, they have never experienced this. And I would give people more time and educate them more around this. Then you can really minimize resistance to certain things and make life easier. It will maybe have the impact that things take more time. So you won't have the MVP out by December. It will be maybe March, but everything will be more smooth. So that's what I would change the next time.
Thank you. The next question I would direct to Ben, first of all, but later on open to all of you. What is your advice when you approach a go-to-market with a product-to-service transformation with a service business based on your previous experience? I mean, maybe to phrase it a bit sharper, just because you rebrand yourself or you create a digital sub-brand doesn't make your 106-year-old company younger, right?
Yeah, so like this. So I've worked in very large blue chip companies, from the Sonys, Japanese, very slow, very methodical, to medium-sized businesses to spin-offs. Right? And I think one of the challenges, for example, is if your business is successful where it is today, then it will naturally have some sort of gravity around it, its customers, its partners. But that same gravity that helps keep it strong can actually very easily kill new businesses. So you need to understand, okay, how new and how different is what we're trying to achieve? And if it's not, 2 or 3 degrees of separation, so completely different, then actually you'll find probably your existing ecosystem can quite easily kill it, mainly because your ecosystem doesn't want you to be too successful, right? And this is one of the paradoxes here, right? You look at Google, it's very successful. Now nobody wants Google to be successful in other areas. And so in the case of Trustonic, we had to look at what is going to be needed to create a business where a broad ecosystem, some of which covers the ARM ecosystem, but also opens up to others, what's going to be successful. So I do think, that you need to understand, is it so different that actually your own ecosystems and the own gravity you've built will kill it? I do think the digital sub-brands is interesting, but there's of course a risk as well of alienating your customer base.
Okay. You want to go next, Alex? Same question?
Yeah, so what I learned is, like, if something is very close to the core business, to integrate the core business and the activities can be an unfair advantage against any startup. So if you're an established organization and you always look at the cool startups, how they do their things, then first of all, it's not always that cool, because it's a big challenge all the time. And it's difficult to really start with sales if you don't have a brand and you don't have established companies. So if you have that, that's an unfair advantage. And I would always utilize that if it's very connected to the core business.
Okay, Carsten, you as the marketing professor, how would you go about this?
Obviously, being a little academic on that, I would try to view it from 2 perspectives: customer perspective and process perspective. Customers, I think, what do we try to do with brands? We try to give orientation to customers in saturated markets. So the only way how we can give orientation through in having new activities is either by creating a brand that is, or by creating an offering that is very close to the original core of the brand, then go along. It does not confuse the customer. Everything is great. If you're moving away quite far from the core of the brand, then yes, create a sub-brand and don't even try to come close like Klöckner I, for example, did, where this worked nicely, using new approaches to open new channels and new customer experience. Second issue to me is process, if you don't break away from your existing brand, that also means you don't break away from existing corporate cultures, processes, dependencies, and all that. So very often we see that despite the fact that there's very smart people in a lot of organizations, those smart people have lost their ability to think entrepreneurially by being tied too much into those corporate structures. So for that is very often to create a skunk work, like a different off-brand, off-label, in which those people can really learn how to translate their existing business into any form of innovative or disruptive offering to customers.
But let me continue with a question to you. Ben said the ecosystem doesn't want you to be successful. Mm-hmm. And now you have, you're in a lucky situation. HDBW is 5 years old. It's a startup university, quite successful, but very young. But now take a really old, traditional German university, and you want to convince the faculty that the new is different. How do you go about this without cannibalizing or demotivating that faculty?
Well, that is in fact one of the reasons why we were founded, because having such kind of development and transformation processes in existing, sometimes decade or century-old organizations is kind of difficult, and the willingness to change is also not very high, homeopathic, to say it conservatively. Therefore, if you look at our university, we pretty much had all new faculty, all faculty that comes from a business background, and that is business-driven, that is customer-driven, that is used to being customer-driven and to managing organizations. And I think this is exactly this kind of skunk works activity which we need in order to transform such a dinosaur type of an organization like universities.
So, I mean, just to build on that, I mean, you've got to also recognize, people talk about, acquisitions and, percentage of acquisitions, for example, that fail, and then the percentage of joint ventures, which even higher fail, right? But actually, very few people actually track the number of projects internally that fail to deliver the results. And as you say, every circumstance can be different. So, what works in one company may not work in the other. So translating that across, I think understanding, do you have the capacity? Is the approach within that business such that it will look at new ideas and will change processes? Or likewise, sometimes you do have to step out, not just because of your ecosystem, but actually from initial inertia as well.
Okay. Like you said, it somehow takes processes, organizations, but it also takes skills. And sometimes the skill sets you need for new ventures are just different than the skill sets which are important to incumbents.
But as Alex said, right, stepping out of a company with a large major sales channel, you're giving up a big advantage. So you have to be sure of it.
Okay. Next question to you, Alex. You mentioned a B2C scenario in the insurance business where you kind of augmented the call center agent's capabilities in order to would it be fair to say it's a job enrichment for the call center agent?
Yeah.
Rather than printing an invoice and shipping it, now being able to advise and engage into a dialogue?
Yeah.
Is that a secret sauce for successful business to product transformation in classical consumer business?
I think it could be. But right now, since all solutions out there are pretty new and the topic of next best offer in this case has been around for already some years, it's just a new way how we're applying to technology to test it and to learn it. And we are like, there are not that big solutions out there who've done this before, so we will see. But the cool thing in times we are right now is that you can build this pretty easy, fast, and not that expensive. And that's why I want to emphasize that and empower everyone to play with these kind of technologies.
Okay, excellent. Ben, you built Lenaro, kind of bottom-up cooperation, open source community, made it extremely successful. Now in Trustonic, if I might say so, you're standing on the shoulders of a number of 800-pound gorillas, like the smartphone manufacturers of the world. I think you're in 17 out of 20 major OEMs, if I'm not mistaken.
18 out of
18, okay. Congrats for the last win. To create an ecosystem, what is the easier inroad? Is it rather the community-driven, bottom-up revolution, or having strong friends such as Samsung and drives this forward?
Well, Samsung, or if you say that the large dominant provider is in some ways is a blessing, and it's also can be a curse, right? So I'd say that the really critical thing out there is how do you drive adoption? Adoption in the platform is everything, and what we've learned is clearly it is helpful if you can focus, back to my point, focus on who are the 1, 2, or 3 companies that can make your market, and those are the people you should focus on first, but not to the extent of not serving other people, right? Samsung want to build their own environments, and what you've learned, or what we learn is, very clearly that you have to transcend their own proposition and actually build something that can scale across. So our big challenge is, one, in a platform business, adoption is everything. And in a particularly European way, growing awareness is the hardest thing. This technology is in most people's devices today. Now, do most of the banks or insurance companies or payment companies use this technology today? No. Now, if we were a US-based venture, we'd probably have $100 million a year of marketing budget to drive that awareness. So you have to work smarter, and that's why we work with large solution integrators to say, here's a good technology, we don't have channels to market, of the thousands of service providers, let's work out how you can grow the awareness and build business on top.
Excellent. Carsten, to you again. And you mentioned the University 4.0. Do you foresee a future where universities do not necessarily have their own faculties? And what would that mean for the current professors and the future professors?
I mean, now I can admit to it, Wolfgang. You know, that's my only reason for being here. I was hoping that one of you ladies and gentlemen might be offering me a job, you know, afterwards, you know, since, you know, maybe universities are collapsing. Oh, yeah, sure. You know, I think there will be something like universities, education providers without having their own faculty, just being smart enough and creating a good ecosystem, managing a good ecosystem, creating a great customer experience, in having access to the knowledge I need, like in the Alexa model I was showing. And I mean, if you think about it, I mean, it might sound odd to a lot of, I don't know if there's any colleagues in here, it might sound odd to us having a university without a faculty. On the other hand, I mean, look at N26, for example. We have a bank, you know, that is operating in a whole lot of countries, that is nicely growing at this point of time, that doesn't have a single branch, that doesn't have a single ATM, and nevertheless makes their customers happy, you know. So I think we'll see very similar disruptions in the university scene as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Carsten. Maybe this links to Ben nicely. You foresee a future where university do not necessarily need to have a physical campus. And Ben, in your ARM legacy, and ARM, to remind you all, is in 95% of all smart devices. How many factories does ARM have?
Zero.
Zero. So ARM is a totally knowledge-driven company and sells knowledge, licensed knowledge, into the world of chipset manufacturers. Is that right?
Yeah, and so if you look at, you know, so I joined ARM, I think, early 2000s, and I left ARM, obviously, when I founded Trustonic. In that time, it was a company that went from, look, we can build something in a cheaper way than you can build it yourself, and so if you license it from us, you save some money. So a make versus buy proposition. Eventually, enough companies actually licensed it that way that it turns out that the software that was running on this hardware is important and hard, and so it became if you're not running on ARM, then you're going to have to lift all of that software yourself. It becomes unbearable unless you're a company like Intel. So the propositions can evolve over time. We talked about Salesforce earlier on. When Salesforce started, it didn't start life as a platform. It started life as a very good sales tool that people congregated around. And then they saw that actually if we open up those APIs, other people can start building value-added services, which makes Salesforce itself a richer, stronger proposition. Which, back to, you know, your ecosystem, those companies are helping you directly and indirectly sell your product.
Excellent. Thank you very much. With this, we have a few minutes left. I would want to open for questions. Do we have a microphone? And do we have questions with you? Okay. Well.
So it's to you, Carsten. It's about the additional value of university campuses, other than just learning. People go there to, well, basically have fun, meet interesting people, work together on stuff, get drunk, whatever. What happens to that in this MOOC world and in the online world?
See, that's exactly what I meant. You have to make universities a place where people grow. And to me, you know, hanging out, meeting new people, getting drunk is a part of personal growth as well. I'm not saying university campuses are becoming obsolete. It's just the way how we use them changes dramatically. We don't need the, 1,500 people university lectures anymore, where somebody tells me something for 90 minutes, which I might as well see from an online clip or read from a book or whatever I do. I need, however, mentors who challenge my thinking, mentors who make me understand how to use those tools. I need to have mentors who help me learn how to learn and to develop myself, because, hey, you know, having those shortened life cycles of knowledge also means that learning never ends. You know, what we used to have is you go to university, you get your bachelor's, get your master's, maybe your PhD, boom, that's it. And then you're equipped for the rest of your life. That's not the reality anymore. So universities have to learn how to reinvent themselves and to, in fact, become, as you say, much livelier places of interaction and much less places of one-way communication as sort of my generation has been used to it in the past. Answers? Okay, good. Thank you.
Any further question?
Yeah, another question to you, Carsten. How do you think the quality of MOOCs compares to traditional classes at university?
Well, I mean, if you think about a MOOC, in a MOOC, for example, you have very reputable Harvard professors, MIT professors, and all that. You saw 120 faculty members of Harvard universities are active in MOOCs. So do you think they're going to do worse than they are in a MOOC than they are in a classroom? The point I would rather stretch on is how can we create the opportunity for interaction, for example, which a MOOC, a recorded video, does not give me, which is in fact why the inventor of the MOOC said it was his worst innovation he ever made. Never mind. I think it's a great way to disseminate knowledge. The next step for universities then might be how can we create, or not might be, is how can we create exactly what we discussed previously, this interaction, this discussion, those growth processes, digitally, in person, offline, whichever ways we are. And I believe there's different business models for that. You might be living somewhere in the Amazonian rainforest. Obviously, it's not possible for you to go to Harvard campus for a seminar from time to time. Therefore, tutoring sessions, digital seminars where you can interact, using, digital classroom solutions, which there's many out there in the market, will certainly help. If you live in a metropolitan area, you might still not want to waste your time sitting in a classroom just to learn. You might want to do that on your couch whenever you have time, but you might be willing to drive into campus for one of those value-adding seminar sessions. I think it's the issue of value on the three levels of sort of learning or studying which we have, which is knowledge generation, understanding, and being able to apply. You always have to ask yourself, what is the value that I as a university can add here, and what are the right formats in order to really provide those kinds of values. And yes, very likely we might be ending up with something like an omni-channel university, like we talk about omni-channel banking these days.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think we are at the end of time. Just one more thing. Thank you all very much for your participation and contribution. One special thanks to Alex. We had yesterday an unfortunate situation that somebody needed to cancel their participation for today. Alex stepped in yesterday afternoon, and I think you contributed fantastically to this event. Thank you very much.
And Wolfgang, let me just join you and kind of take over, because the session is called Get Started, and we heard, thanks a lot, big round of applause. The session is called Get Started, and we heard from Ben Kate, platforms are the basis to create ecosystems. We heard from Alexander Franke, platforms and AI are the basis to create new forms of collaborations with AI, and we heard from Carsten Bartsch, platforms transform learning at the university. And I think you get the point. At the core of all these three stories are platforms. And let me welcome Dr. Wolfram Unold, Head of Strategy and Market Intelligence from Osram Light AG on stage. Very warm welcome.
Thank you.
And let me start with you how we have met. 4 weeks ago only, I would say. 5 weeks ago, maybe. I was on tour with Miriam Meckel from Wirtschaftswoche. The Future Board is a group of business people looking at the future of business models around artificial intelligence. And we said we start to look in Germany, and that's what we did. We started to go Deutsche Bank and the DFKI, and then we said we will not go to the Silicon Valley because that's not relevant for our industries. We said we go to the East Coast and we look at the hottest things in artificial intelligence. And here we go. we go to a company called Digital Lumens. That's a company which says they're producing lights and much more, but the company says, you know, the best lights are these lights which are turned off. And Dr. Unol did the introduction. You got yourself a platform. I'm really looking forward for your story.
Thanks. Thanks for inviting me to share that experience from moving from a hardware company, as every one of you probably knows us from the light bulbs, which we sold this year, and actually we removed also the logo from our brand name, to a smartware company, and from that to actually also a smart services, and eventually building these smart services in a kind of a platform approach. How do I... Next. So what is the story in lighting which brings us to that approach from hardware to smart services? The transition from traditional lighting technologies like the light bulb, the incandescent bulb, invented over 100 years ago, to LED lighting is strongly ongoing. As I mentioned, we sold our bulb business, and just last week we actually opened the largest LED factory in the world in Malaysia, and we are one of the largest LED manufacturers, which you can see also in that picture. That's a dramatic change from a light bulb to LEDs. With LEDs, of course, you can do much more than with traditional light sources. You can dim, you can tune from warm white to cold white to colors, etc. And that actually then comes into the digital age. So not only is an LED a solid-state light source, it's a digital light source, so to speak, but light sources with that will become connected. And market studies say, for different reasons, that in the next few years, 1 billion light sources will be connected to building management systems or even to the internet. And of course, this 1 billion, so that's a large size. It's about the size of the cars in the world, the smartphones in the world. The question is, what can you do with that in terms of then smart services as well? Now, if you look at that ceiling, you can count how many light sources are on that ceiling. And all these light sources have kind of a bird's eye view on that room. So they are not covered by everything. If you install a video camera in that corner, typically you will not see the full room. It's covered by something. And especially if things move and also furniture or apparatus move in the room, this camera will eventually be covered. From the ceiling, you always have a very good view. Luminaires have a very dense distribution on the ceiling. And as I said, these luminaires will become smart. They are powered because for lighting you need electricity. And then you can easily embed sensors into each of these luminaires. And that's actually what I come then at the end of this talk is Digital Lumens doing. You can add sensors to each of that luminaires. And then you have kind of a sensory system in the ceiling. And you can, it's like the skin of a body, it's the skin of the room. And depending on what kind of sensors you're adding to that, and you also have a mesh network, of course, because the light sources are connected, so they talk to each other, you can know about everything you want to know about the room without having a video camera with a high resolution. You basically have a low resolution camera on temperature, on humidity, on presence, whatever you want, on CO levels, CO2 levels, on VOC levels. You have a low resolution in the room. Here you probably have 50 luminaires, so you have a 50 pixel camera actually on the ceiling. And with that concept of a ceiling, you can start to generate insights about the room. And that's where it moves from smartware, from just smart luminaires, really to a smart service offering. Now, as I've shown on the last slide, actually, it's not only the 1 billion luminaires in the next couple of years. In the world, there are 50 billion luminaires installed today, and eventually all of these will get connected. So you have 50 billion nodes on the ceiling all over the world, which you can use. Now the question, if you want to take that from a smart product to a smart service, what is the challenge? Also the challenge we encounter going this way. The first, of course, it needs to be cost competitive, also against other technologies. This actually is the case because as you leverage a light management system network on the ceiling, which is there typically anyway, and which is paid by the energy savings from dimming luminaires, and that's what Frank mentioned, actually the best energy saving if you don't switch on the luminaire, and you will find out if you have this kind of sensory system in the room, especially in factory halls, in warehouses. Most light sources don't need to be on because there's no one which needs light. Also in data centers and this kind of things, lights are on, but they don't need to be on. They only need to be on if someone is in the room or someone is going to be in the room, and not else. So this sensory system, basically the backbone, is paid by the energy savings generated through the initial sensors you put into each luminaire. And on top of that, you can, for very low marginal cost, you can add whatever sensor you want to have in your use case to really start understanding the room. Now, the other challenge, of course, is what do you want to do with this data? Because that's just data. It's not yet an insight for a customer. It's not yet an actionable insight for the customer. Again, the advantages of the system, because the system has a very good veracity of data. We heard this earlier today. If you want to do machine learning, pattern recognition, i.e. you need very good veracity of data. If your data is messed up, then the result can be anything. Now, in this system, every sensor date as a geographic print, because you know where the luminaire is, where the sensor is attached, and you have a synchronized timestamp. So actually you get a data model out of the ceiling which has a very high veracity with a geographic footprint, with a geographic stamp and a timestamp on it. So then you can start really doing pattern recognition on this camera system. You can do sensor fusions. You can correlate the different sensors, temperature or presence, etc., over the room or within a sensor node to really find out what is the pattern. So then you can, with very simple sensors actually, you can distinguish a fork truck from a person, because if you have a presence detector, which is a passive infrared, which costs a few cents, and there's a certain noise, it's a forklift, it's not a human being. If it's another noise, it's a human being, not a forklift. If you do the sensor fusion across the room, then you can actually detect how people are moving, because you move from one presence detector to another one, and then you can trace not the person as a person, but you can trace the movement of an asset, of a thing. And this is all based on a very low resolution camera, which is very cost efficient. And the sensor fusion actually you're doing with low cost sensors. But to know what kind of insights you want to have, of course you need to cooperate with customers. You need to gain the domain insight into the factory, into the warehouse, and this is actually the challenge. You have to start with end-to-end projects to really engage with your customers, to find out what is the pain he has, what is the insight he needs. And if you can give him continuous insights into his process through that system, then he's actually also willing to pay on an ongoing basis for this smart service as gaining insights into his processes. The other advantage of this ceiling is that you can easily connect additional sensors anytime without calling an IT guy, because basically you can take any sensor with an I/O device interface, put it in the room, like a temperature sensor on this wall. It's connected to the system, and it's very easy, drag and drop actually, to commission it in your dashboard, and then we have an additional sensor in that. So you can play around actually. So you can be very agile in this structure, in this IoT structure you build in the room. You can try out things and you can stop them, or you can enhance them or expand them, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. It's all on a very low marginal additional cost. And that is actually what this company is doing from a principle. This is one of their projects. So you see a factory hall, and each luminaire has a sensor node, and you have also additional sensors in the field. They can be power measuring sensors, they can be thermometers, they can be humidity sensors. Humidity can be very important in a cardboard company, or actually in a warehouse where it's cardboard. because humidity is bad for the cardboards. Temperature is in the food industry. They want to know, and they increasingly need to know for insurances, if actually the temperature along the process, yes, thanks, is kept in place. So here easily you can detach all kinds of temperature sensors, and then the company can prove with the data model that they really had all the temperature in place so the food does not spoil. They call this intelligence overhead because actually each luminaire is a small computer, and each luminaire is a sensor node. They communicate with the gateway. If the gateway fails, they still run on themselves, save the data as long as the connection is there anymore. This doesn't actually happen, but it's a fallback. The same then, they mirror it out into the cloud, the data which is used for machine learning and artificial intelligence, so that they basically build a virtual world of the real world. So they have a digital twin architecture where you can then model the world of your factory or warehouse or retail in the cloud and analyze. And actually we're also speaking with like insurances now which are interested in this kind of perception of the room to calibrate their systems, because you can also of course early detect emergency cases before they happen. Actually you can detect fire hazards because machines are warming up or something is warming up before a fire is there. You can detect water leaks before there's a huge damage because the humidity increases in a certain part of the building, and you may have other effects which you can measure, correlate, do machine learning, do pattern recognition on it. So you can really find out what is happening before you have a loss. So this is about the smart service they offer. And then you can build this, and this is what I indicated with the 5 apps, so to speak, on the bottom. You can build this system actually to a platform. As I said, you can connect basically any sensor, so you can build an ecosystem of sensor manufacturers which connect into the system. But you can also add apps as people find out that there is a use case where it is interesting or where you can do something. And as the system is cloud connected or cloud based, once you have a real meaningful use case for one company, you just spread it out to every other company and offer it to them. So that by that also I'm almost done. By that also the customers on that system, they can actually benefit from each other, from the learnings they have, yeah, without knowing each other. So, but they don't need to share, of course, anything if they want. You can also containerize it and put it just on the premise of the customer. Then he keeps it for his own, but you just update the system. So this is basically the company. We acquired them this summer after we had a couple of years or 3 years looked into this kind of system ourselves, coming from that idea that lighting becomes connected, that there's a mesh network and what you can do with it. And now we plan to grow them internationally and move them into a platform system as a next step. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Wolfram. And you know, let's talk a bit about the journey you're doing. You said at the beginning you're transforming the company. From what used to be a products company, you were selling products, to becoming a service company based on platforms. How hard is that?
I think first we are not leaving the hardware. We will always be a large hardware company. As I said, we just opened a
smart products,
a wafer fab. We have product components, we have smart products, and then we go into smart services. But actually to go from products to services, that is a challenge for the employees and the capabilities they're used to, the way of doing they're used to. Typically in the world we come from also from light sources, also from LEDs. We define the technology together with competitors basically, so there's a standard design and a technology, and the customer basically has to follow that technology. Light bulb was very prominent because you had the Edison interface, that's why it's called an E27. You have an electromechanical interface in a light bulb. If someone wants to use such a light bulb, he just needs to make his luminaire, it works. Now in this case, it's much different. We have to really understand the domain know-how, we have to get the know-how of the domain of our customers to develop service offerings which are adopted. Because if you just sell them sensors, I mean, they can buy sensors from everyone. These sensors you don't need to develop. They are very low cost. They are there for many years most of the time. So it's really about selling them a service, a solution and a service, and that is hard for a company coming from a very product-centric.
Products. You know, we think we have done a lot of research in the Architect about what you are doing, and I find you actually are a shining example of such a transformation. But what we said in the Architect was about smart products. You just said it, smart products, smart services, and then you give your customers a new experience, which differentiates you from the competition. And maybe the session is get started. How did you develop, let's go through the 3 elements. How did you develop the idea to make your product smarter? You know, we looked at it and suddenly there were like 20 sensors in the lamp or something like that. How did that idea come? Was that incremental or was that a long process? How do you get into that?
There are many ideas and approaches actually we took. There's the common one, we just try to add additional features, or we try to add additional features from a product-centric point of view. But then we also started a series of InnoVentures, internal InnoVentures, internal startups. One of them you may know from the residential Lightify, where we try to do basically the same move to smart products and then also to a platform approach. And we also acquire companies because it is so hard to gain the critical mass in a kind of fast way if you just do it on your own. And of course, some of these InnoVentures, probably most of them, they fail. And that's, I think, also something to learn, that this failure mode, that to fail actually is good as long as you take the lesson from why you fail, you have a look into it, and try again and do it better next time.
I think you mentioned something very important, because failure is part of that learning process. Ideally, we all fail fast and cheap, I guess. But you know, in exploiting that, so you basically said, in terms of learning, we'll start digital pilots, we start startups, we buy companies, and we'll navigate the journey. Mm-hmm. Now, when you go to the services, you know, that is a product journey, and then you went to the platforms and services. And at the end, you know, the way I understood is, you're not delivering light anymore. Actually, you do that, but you deliver many more use cases to solve customer problems. Did you co-create with the customers around their issues? You talked about the digital twin of the customer facility. So how do you get about winning over a new customer to become a platform partner?
Yeah, that's actually what they do at Digital Lumens very good, that they come in with the system, and as I said, basically it's paid by the energy savings of the system. And then, of course,
basically self-funding.
It's self-funding, but then you need, of course, to select, and that's maybe also the challenge, you need to select customers which are really curious, which have a willingness to play around with it, which bring in ideas. And there are some great customers. I visited one of them, there's south of Boston. He basically self-commissioned the system because it's so easy to commission. And in the first meeting, he just came with this a list of ideas. So he says, now, this is a food processing company. He says, in this part of the factory, I have production running on shoes. On this part, I have a cleaning team. Now, this is great. In the morning, I want to draw a border around the cleaning team, which they should not leave this area, because they should not go into the production area as a cleaning team. And I can do that before breakfast. So I need to do that before breakfast. And actually, that's possible with the system. We wouldn't have done that and just tried to sell it. Now, the customer brings in that idea. So now they do this app that's easy with a software programmer, bring it back to him, and then he can test it. And he's really, and he came up with all these ideas. He said, that's great. Because now if the cleaning team leaves the space, and I explained it to them, of course, before, I receive immediately an email that someone crossed a borderline. Now, if you do that with doors and walls, this costs a hell of a money. Or they spend $20,000 on letters, and they start disappearing. Is that if you can track these letters from me, this is fantastic.
Let's talk
$20,000 in a couple of years in letters.
Yeah.
So.
You know, I think that's a second message. So you make the product smart, and you create a platform, and suddenly your customers come with use cases.
Exactly.
And you know, just to probe a bit, I don't know if you can tell, but how long does it take to create a use case? How much money is involved? 20,000 for the system, but if you want to add a new use case, you don't leave a zone. How much money are we talking? How much time are we talking?
That's not a lot of money. That's a couple of days for a software engineer. Once you have defined the use case with the customer and you have the system in place, in case you don't need additional sensor types, but even then a sensor typically costs $50 or something. But if it's out of the existing data, it's just a couple of afternoons for a software engineer to program it in, and then you have it for all customers. So they have 2,500 installations. So if one customer comes up with an idea, you can multiply it by 2,500 immediately.
Which is amazing from a scale. So basically, it makes you an agile company?
Exactly. That is really an agile company, and the management team of this company comes from robotics. They do not come really from lighting. They're in lighting now for a long time, but they come from robotics. They come from networking companies, so they have a completely different perspective on
how does it
lighting.
How does it? You said being a top class smart product manufacturer is what you are. You have been and you are. But getting now the services in, probing a bit more on getting started on how do you make sure that the old system, which is probably very mighty, leaves enough space for the new services to flourish? What is the governance you're applying in the company?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question, yes. We're not integrating this company I just showed. They are completely, although they're not this big as the other business units we have yet, they report directly to the board. To safeguard that there are not too much interference. And actually, we let them talk to all the other business units, and then there's tons of ideas going back and forth, so they can also learn from the ideas we have on the technology side. But we do not integrate them because they would be dead day two, basically. They would just, probably the people would leave because they are not used to a 30,000 people company. But they also need the freedom and the agility, and not a three-phase approval process with a 10 people steering committee, whatever. But really to be at the customer, have an idea, implement it, move on.
So you need to have the space to breathe,
yes.
for the new ones to grow. I think when I look at this, for me this is a model, seriously model transformation. We looked at so many companies, but being clear about the vision and the smart product, creating a services platform, and then basically co-creating, what you said is co-creating use cases with your customers, and then you're agile to deliver that.
Exactly.
Maybe a last question, we have 1 minute left. What's next?
The next phase is basically building this to a platform, but different from the platforms which are out there, which are huge platforms, and the customer doesn't know what to do with it, or he has to employ a consultant to get him on the platform. We want to really build up this platform step by step with customer insights, and get this to really a significant size. Not competing this with these bigger, more agnostic or more generic platforms. We will also here be in an ecosystem kind of relationship, but really being the domain know-how owner of such a platform business.
So basically, light plus insurance, light plus security, light plus utilization, and so on.
Exactly.
That's the future.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Big round of applause. Osram becoming a platform company. Thanks, Wolfram. And we have a 10 minutes break, and then we go to the one topic which is of concern for everybody, cybersecurity. Can we develop and operate all these solutions while being safe? Be back in 10 minutes. Thank you.